We are talking Formula One with myself and Mr. Johnny Herbert. It's round 6, the glitz and the glamour of Monaco. But before we do that, shall we talk about Barcelona?
Shall we?
And, well, was it a shock or was it not when Lewis Hamilton won that one?
Well, I think it was a shock because it looked as if it wasn't going to be won by Lewis. It looked as if Sebastian sort of had control of it. The team, Mercedes, were very, very clever on their strategy when they got sort of Valtteri Bottas involved, which held up Sebastian, which I think enabled Lewis to actually sort of get that win and just slightly have that quicker car, it seems, sort of in the latter part of that race. But a great race all round because we did see that pole position come from Lewis Hamilton, as we always expect him to do. But of course then there was that slight twist around when it came down to the race. And then this is what we've discussed before. It's going to be like this the whole way through the season, and Valtteri's still going to be part of this. Kimi's still going to be part of this, although he wasn't part of it in Barcelona with the coming together he had with Max Verstappen and Valtteri Bottas as well. They both blamed Valtteri for that one, but it was a great one because Barcelona's a really, really tricky one, because to get the car to work as you want it to work is a very, very hard one. But it looks as if, again, we've got a Mercedes that has the edge maybe in the qualifying, and then there's that slight little twist that comes into it when it's in the race, and Sebastian and Ferrari look very, very strong. But it looks as if we've got this just ongoing now, because it doesn't seem as if anybody went into Barcelona with the normal changes that you get at the first sort of European race of the year, where someone would jump ahead. We saw the new nose on the Mercedes, for example, which was quite sort of an obvious thing to see, but it didn't seem to give them an extra edge when it came down to the most important part of the weekend, which is the race on the Sunday.
Lewis lost out early on, didn't he? Sebastian overtook him. He got that back. I mean, that must be pleasing for him. I mean, what does that tell us? And just how much is this creeping into a three-way race rather than, you know, because it looked like it was just going to be between Vettel and Hamilton.
Yeah, but although we were talking about sort of what happened after Barcelona, and again it was Lewis and Sebastian that were the guys that were at the sort of the top of the podium. So that's where they're still very, very strong themselves. You know, Valtteri was still good that he got the result that he did. Kimi was a bit unlucky, or racing incident, whatever you want to call it. So he hasn't been involved in the race itself, so he's dropped a bit further behind. But overall, I think what was a very interesting sort of comment with Lewis, he actually felt, and actually was sort of quite chuffed, that Sebastian was very disappointed about obviously losing the race, because he's got one up on him. And that's just this mental game, as well as what's going to happen with the teams on the racetrack itself. It's those little mental games that are going to sort of start to happen, and we're probably going to see a little bit more of actually off the track at the same time. And it's obvious Sebastian was disappointed because he thought he had the race won. It was Lewis who wasn't probably expecting that race to come his way. But in typical Lewis style, never gives up until sort of, you know, that sort of checkered flag is dropped in front of you, which is exactly what we saw in Barcelona. So they're both driving very, very well at the moment. Their strengths are always going to be what happens on the track, of course, but of course it's that mental part that's going to come into play. But then they're both world champions, they've both got the experience, and they're going to both play that game as well. So it's going to be fascinating to see exactly how that pans out.
I think Lewis Hamilton, he's given a very strange interview in an Australian magazine, but he said that this time last year he had the in-house fighting with Rosberg, whatever. He said at the moment there's nobody I dislike on the circuit. I haven't got a problem with anybody. He said, but with racing itself he had a problem because it stole his youth. And he said that the heads of Formula One want to turn you into a square and just put you in a box. Is he trying to become some sort of anti-hero or something? I mean, is he rebelling?
I think, well, there is an element of sort of, I think, sort of rebel, if you want to call it that, because I think what he was disappointed with last year was where he felt the team was sort of getting involved with the racing and with the championship itself. So I get that, and that goes back to what he's saying, back to sort of, you know, his karting days, let's say, where you did it yourself, you got on with it, there were no influences from the outside, and it was the best man wins. But when there are certain things that sort of happen, you always talk about Abu Dhabi, where the team were telling him to speed up when he was trying to back up the pack into his teammate Nico Rosberg. That's what racing drivers should be able to do. You should be able to do anything that will give you that little edge over someone else. And I know he's been quite critical of sometimes saying, well, actually, I don't know why now the teams or the team should allow the teammates to share the data anymore. Because if you are naturally better and more gifted, why should you allow your teammate to analyse what you do so they can actually better themselves, rather than it is the man on track, and that is where you sort of show your ultimate speed. So I get where he's coming from. There is an element, yes, it is a team sport at the same time, but I am very much, it is the drivers who are in the car, when that visor goes down, the lights go out, it's down to those guys to show us why they've got the best skills. Now that is the driving, but it's also sort of the situation with strategy that comes into play, and you making the right call, or sometimes you make the wrong call. So I get where Lewis is coming from, because he sometimes feels that the pure natural ability is sometimes being lost because of other influences that are coming from the outside.
He and Vettel nearly clashed wheels, didn't they?
Yep.
And I liked Sebastian Vettel afterwards in the post-race interview said, we're both still here. And it did show, I mean, there wasn't a rivalry, there wasn't any trash talking, was there, about it?
Respect.
Yeah.
It was all respect, and I think that's where Lewis is sort of happy at the moment with the situation that he's got, that he's racing a guy that has won 4 world championships. He knows how good he is on the track. He knows how respectful he is to other drivers, and Lewis included in that. And that's what's great, because that sort of closeness that they're getting, that wheel-to-wheel battle, is partly what we were discussing before with what Lewis loves to do when he's in a Formula One car, and what he used to do when he was in a kart. And Sebastian is very much like that. What's always makes a driver stand out that little bit more is the ability to judge what the other driver's doing. Give them that little bit of room, but at the same time you squeeze them at the same time, and their ability to sort of really get their wheels literally kissing is brilliant, because that's a skill. That's what we want to see, and I think that's what excites. It used to excite me as a driver, and I'm sure it's exciting Lewis and Sebastian, because they know that they've got one hell of a season coming their way, and they know it's not going to be easy, but they know they want to show who's the best, and the best is always shown when they're actually on the racing track, and it's that little final little movement that just might edge out the fellow competitor on the track, and then you win a Grand Prix.
Force India, 4th and 5th.
Brilliant, wasn't it? Yeah.
Pleasing for them.
Yeah, and Esteban Ocon, his best finish in his Formula One career, and how consistent has he been at the same time, as has Sergio Perez, as has the team. They've got that lovely ethos that seems to sort of work beautifully. They haven't got the same money as the guys at the sharp end, but their ability to use everything they have and plant it all into the development of the car shows, when we have the race results. And I think that was just a brilliant result. And it's, do you expect it from Force India? You do, because they are just so good at getting the best out of themselves. Plus, they've got 2 good drivers. One guy with experience, been through the difficult times, Sergio Perez, when he was at McLaren, has bounced back brilliantly, very settled and happy in his situation he's got at Force India. And then you've got the young whippersnapper as well, Esteban Ocon, who a lot of people have a lot of good things to say about. They expect a lot from him in the future. The man that sort of beat Max Verstappen to the Formula 3 European Championship. So he's no slouch whatsoever, and he is only going to get stronger, because he is the man with the least experience in that team. But it's a team that will get around him, help him, guide him, and probably get him in a situation eventually probably to beat Sergio Perez. But Sergio won't want that.
Fernando Alonso getting a finish, then we lose him.
Well, great qualifying, 7th place, but still McLaren's such a long way off. Barcelona is not a particularly difficult circuit. It's a track that all the teams know. They've been testing there for donkey's years. So everybody and the drivers obviously know how it works, but they were 1.8 seconds off pole position in qualifying. Great performance, yes, overall, but still a long way off. Now, my biggest thing is probably, is that 1.8 seconds all the engine? Is it? That's a massive amount. I can't believe it is. Obviously, there's a little bit of the chassis, and there is the engine that we know about at the same time. But good on him. Shame with the result didn't really happen. I think he ended up in the gravel, didn't he, on the first lap, and then it just sort of didn't really materialise. Put some fresh tyres on at the end, dropped back to 15th, got back to 12th, not in the points. Now he's in Indy, probably, well, not quite as we speak, but he's probably, he's in Indy preparing for the next sort of 2 weeks before the Indianapolis 500 race itself. So I'm glad he's done it, to be honest, because it's a horrible situation to see a two-time world champion struggling to sort of get into the top 10 most of the time, especially when it comes down to the races. And I think now he's got an opportunity of showing that true class driver that he is. But what will happen if he, let's say he wins Indianapolis 500? Will he sort of go, actually, I like this. I might sort of, I might move my allegiance to another formula. And that's where McLaren are trying to really look after him and sort of pamper to him in many regards to keep him for the future. But again, McLaren have got to give him the car. So if they don't give him the car, I don't see what the point is. And the comment he has come out with recently, he's ready to talk to anybody at the moment. So let's see what happens. But we obviously wish him luck in Indianapolis.
Could we see a Graham Hill scenario? Le Mans, Indy 500?
Don't see why not. He's in Andretti, one of the best teams in the IndyCar circuit. It's a track that Marco Andretti, the son of Michael, and Michael, the son of Mario, goes very well at. I go back to Marco. So Marco goes very well at, and that's actually been with Andretti at the same time. So the team knows the circuit. The team is one of the very, very best. They can supply him what he needs. It's just that process of learning a four-cornered circuit at 225, 230 miles an hour average, of doing one lap. One lap's one thing, or it's an average of 3 laps when they do the qualifying on pole day. But it's when you're racing four abreast, that's where the whole racing dynamic completely changes. Because Formula One, we're only used to study 2 abreast, probably maybe 3 if we're lucky. But because they're travelling at that speed, the amount of sort of dirty air that you're getting and the buffeting that goes on, it's quite violent. We're actually in one of those cars at that speed. But it's knowing how the car changes, and that's what's very, very different. We know it in Formula One, but it's only when you're following one car. But as I said, when you're following 4 car abreast, the air is completely different, the car responds completely different, and that's only come through experience, and that will only happen for him actually when he gets in the race itself. But it's fascinating to see it because it's a massive challenge. Graham Hill has done it obviously, but he's done all 3. Fernando's spoken about it. He's been to Le Mans. He's waved the checkered flag, I think it was, when he went there, and he still seems to have this dream of trying to win those 3. He's a class act. There's no reason why he can't. And this is maybe that first sort of journey in Indy where he's sort of going to maybe get that chance of winning for the first time as a rookie. It happened last year. So it's a chance for him. It's a massive challenge, but it's a massive chance, and it'd be great if it did happen in this modern era that we have in motorsport.
Well, let's have a look at the standings then. Ahead of Monaco, you've got Vettel on 104 points, Hamilton 98, Bottas on 63, and Raikkonen on 49. What's that telling us? Well, apart from the fact that it's incredibly close.
Completely close. Kimi's the problem because he's just slowly dropping out from those top 3. Valtteri's just sort of sticking in there at the moment. He just needs to have a couple of good results, as in beating his teammate, or maybe beating actually Sebastian as well, and that will just start to sort of edge him back into it. But he's holding on at the present time. But it's a great battle at the front. Lewis, as you know, has cut that point deficit down sort of quite nicely after Barcelona. But then we're going to be going to a track, Monaco, very, very difficult to overtake, very important to get that pole position. They both go very well around there, as in Sebastian and Lewis. We're going to have to see exactly what Valtteri is able to do through those narrow streets of Monaco. You can't rule out Kimi to get into that mix. Now, what I would expect to sort of come our way as the races sort of progress is who's going to take points off of the other. That's where it's going to come in. We saw what happened in Russia, where Lewis ended up 4th. It was Kimi and his teammate who were able to sort of take those extra points away. We always know Sebastian is going to be pretty much there anyway, but it's those other 2 that are going to be very, very important. So it's great that the championship's got much closer at the front. I'm glad that Valtteri's just hanging on at the moment, and we need Kimi just to do that extra little special thing, just to get himself back into it. But it's going to be a long, tall order for him, I think.
The championship odds, then Vettel 7-5, Lewis Hamilton 19-20, and Bottas 20-1.
Okay, yeah.
The championship. I mean, I suppose that reflects where they are, doesn't it? 63 against 98 and 104.
Yeah, exactly. I think, yeah, that reflects it absolutely 100%. And of course, Valtteri is sort of that outside man who we still don't know. We've seen him win a race. We've seen him get a pole position. We know he's fast, but it's always down to that consistency. And the guys that are doing the consistency are the guys who are at the top of that tree, as in Lewis and Sebastian. So it's no surprise with the odds there that obviously they are obviously the favourites there. But the outside man is the man who has been the best of, let's say, the second drivers, if you want to call it that, is obviously Valtteri Bottas.
Is it too far, now?
Nope, I don't think so. There are so many situations that can come our way as far as how the racing can sometimes be a sort of a mean sport where you might be leading a race, as Lewis Hamilton was last year in Malaysia, and the engine blows up. That can still happen. Unreliability can still happen. The race we saw in Barcelona, we saw Verstappen and we saw Kimi getting involved with Bottas. Bottas was able to get away with it, but the other two sort of suffered a bit of damage. So that's where that even can come into play at the same time. So there is so many different scenarios that can come into effect, but of course it's those two guys who I said are very good of awareness of what's going on around them to keep themselves out of trouble as well. And the best place to start so you keep out of trouble, it's either pole position or it's second.
Look at the constructors. The Mercedes 161, Ferrari 153. So their odds reflect that, don't they? Mercedes 5-11 with Ferrari 19-11. I mean, they're squeezed right down to the
yeah.
Because there's nothing between them, is there?
No, there's nothing between them except there is one teammate who's more consistent than the other one, and that's Valtteri again. So from a team perspective, Mercedes, yes, you've got to say they're sort of the favourites at the moment because they've got two guys who are able to win races, as they have done so far this season, and that hasn't happened on the other side. Kimi is something, but just waiting for that to sort of happen again. And at the moment, we thought we had seen it in Russia, and then Barcelona again, it sort of didn't go for him. Unlucky, sure, but yeah, Mercedes seem to be doing a good job. And it's all these upgrades that are going to be coming to us very, very shortly, or continue to come during this sort of European part of the season to see how that sort of changes the dynamic, if it does at all.
So, Monaco then?
Yes.
Everybody's favourite.
Crown in the jewel. Yeah.
Tell us what it's like. I mean, to be there, to do it. I mean, it always looks fantastic, doesn't it? It takes you away. Yeah,
it is. Monaco anyway it's pretty. The whole sort of backdrop of it is fantastic. All the boats in the harbour, so it looks brilliant. It's got the history at the same time. The biggest thing it's got is the challenge of the circuit, a street circuit. It's not as bumpy as it used to be. So it's pretty much 99% resurfaced as a complete lap as the years have gone by. So it's very, very smooth nowadays. But you've still got those barriers, those three sort of story barriers that are around the track the whole way around. You've got to get yourself on perfect lines. If you're going into the corner itself, you've got to clip the apex, which is normally the barrier, so you've got to just skim that barrier, then use all the road, and then maybe just have a little tap with the barrier on the outside. This is talking about qualifying, obviously. You've got to risk things in Monaco, and you've got to be able to push yourself to the limit. And what's special about Monaco, there are drivers that absolutely love it.
Yeah.
Love that challenge, are willing to take that risk, aren't scared about the situation that might happen if you do sort of go clouting into the barriers. And then there are the other ones that are afraid, because it is something that is a massive challenge for the mind, just to get yourself in this confident zone within the cockpit of the car. Then you can sort of really utilise what's going on. You have the tunnel, they're probably going to be exiting the tunnel, I think, between about 165, 180 miles an hour. I'm not quite sure what it's going to be this time around. That's a massive amount of speed through these narrow streets, and where you're at that sort of 170, 180 miles an hour, the exit of the tunnel, you then start braking downhill, so the car becomes sort of a little bit loose at the back. We've got all the harvesting, all the energy sort of being pushed and shoved back into the batteries. That makes the rear end that little bit more nervous. We've seen people clout the barrier on the exit of the tunnel as well, as they break in towards the chicane, and then you go through the chicane. Bit of a Mickey Mouse one, really tight left. Got to get really hug the barrier on the left hand side, use a bit of the curb as you turn right, and then as you shoot down the straight towards my favourite corner to back. It's a very quick left-hander, but you can't actually really see the apex until it's, you know, right on your nose. So you just got to commit to it, and that's where these drivers are, or ability to have that sort of skill to literally go into there, turn in, and just throw the car into the corner, and then pick up the throttle. It's a brilliant sight to see. And Monaco this year, I think we've got one hell of a battle coming up with Ferrari and Mercedes.
If you're saying this is the race for the gambler, as I mean, you know, Senna won 6, you know, because he could gamble, and it wasn't bad.
Yeah.
Does it favour then Lewis Hamilton because you would say he is probably the more maverick?
Yeah, they're just different. If you're doing it with, well, let's say Sebastian to start with, Kimi's very good because Kimi, again, his spatial awareness is very good. You know, is he as sharp as he was once before? At the moment, you would probably say maybe not quite, but obviously he's still mighty quick as he is at the moment. Valtteri is someone that we're still learning about, seeing exactly what he's able to do at sort of all the challenging circuits that we go to. But then you've got those front two, you know, the world champions who are driving sublimely at the moment. They're probably driving maybe the best they've ever driven at the moment. They're under a lot of pressure. Sebastian only had it when it was against his teammate Mark Webber, but he was able to dominate that, which is why he won his 4 world championships, and Mark was not be able to win one. Then Lewis has sort of had all those sort of, I don't know, Fernando Alonso's in his first season, and then Jenson Buttons, and of course latterly with Nico Rosberg. So he's had that ability to be able to battle against those 3 world champions effectively, and has been able to beat them, but they've actually been able to beat him at the same time. So that's a strength that he's going to be able to use when he's in this battle he's got it with Sebastian at the moment. But the way their mental approach seems to be at the moment, there is that respect we spoke about earlier on, but the respect always seems to sort of almost disappear, because you've always got to have a little bit of an edge when you're driving, and that's why I was saying just got to have a little bit of that cheeky sort of elbow stuff when you're racing, which is what they're going to do. Monaco is one of those where you're going to try and outfox somebody going into Saint Devote the first corner, just sort of try and place the car that will make them look in the mirror and just maybe make that little error. And I think those two are just going to be mighty confident going into Monaco itself, at a track they both love and adore, and that challenge is going to be there for us to see in a massive way. So those two to me are definitely the standout two of the season so far.
You were talking earlier on about Barcelona, about the only way to avoid any trouble is to get pole.
Yeah.
If there's any race where you want to be pole, is this the one? Because of, like you say, because of the tight lanes and the constricted areas.
Yes, it is.
Is that a no-brainer?
That's a no-brainer. Yes, it's the one where, you know, the way that the circuit is sort of configured, you know, it's just very difficult to pass. As I said, they've resurfaced it. It used to be sort of with a sort of the edges of the circuit you actually never used, because of the curbing was there, it was impossible to really sort of pass. Now that has disappeared. So there are overtaking opportunities. They're still very slim. The exit of the tunnel is one of those. Saint Devote can be done, but it's a little bit rare. Going into the Lowe's hairpin, there are the occasions where we see someone dive up the inside, because the typical line is to go very wide and then turn in. But as soon as you go wide, you open up the inside, and as soon as you throw a car down there, he can't turn back. You can always then lean out. There's just enough room with the steering lock that they have to get round the corner. So Lowe's is one of those that can still happen. So it's still possible. But pole position, or especially the front row anyway, is the most important thing. But ultimately, with everything that we've got this year, with the starts being a little bit more down to the driver, obviously you've got to come out at turn 1 in the lead at the same time and then control it from that point on. But we've seen strategy come into play, and that's where we're going to have the same thing, I think, this time around as well. So, but the drivers will be up for this challenge massively.
Tyres important to get your strategy right in Monaco?
Yeah, not as bad as others because it's normally very, very dirty on a Friday in FP1 and FP2 because there's all the buses going around and the cars and the bikes. So there's a little bit of sort of diesel that he actually gets on the track. That takes a bit of time to sort of let's get rubbered over, shall we put it that way? And then of course then the grip starts to come into play. But the tyres overall are not really going to be, I think a big issue. It's going to be if you can just get the right. Typically, as Monaco has been for as long as I've been going there, it's just getting that balance. You get that right balance, and that doesn't matter because you're able then to look after the tyre anyway, even if it's an aggressive, let's say, tyre on that particular surface. So overall, it's just going to be really down to sort of who gets the right balance at the right time because it just evolves so quickly. But you've got to be ahead of the game because you've got to be in the right place at the right time, especially when it comes down to that final top 10 pole position shootout.
Let me tap into your incisive brain then. Pole, second and third.
Wow.
Who do you think?
I think I'm going to go for Lewis for the pole position just purely because it just seems they've still got that pure speed edge over the Ferrari. I'm going to put Valtteri there. And I'm doing this on a little bit of an unknown because this is the first time he's gone there in a completely competitive outfit and competitive car. So I think I'm going to throw him into the mix on that front. Then we're going to get sort of that second row lockout with the Ferrari. So it'll be a front row lockout, I think, with the Mercedes, and then secondly with Ferrari. The only twist you're going to get there is going to be Sebastian Vettel. You know, I think he could throw a spanner in the works at a circuit that is not generally about speed or ultimate downforce. It's about the ability of the man to throw that car through those very, very narrow barriered streets, and Sebastian, you've got to say, is one of the best at being able to do that. But just on that pure pace, I'm not going to quite get the Ferrari on the front row.
Okay, then. Who is going to win this 6th round?
Again, I'm going to have to go what we spoke about. Pole position is going to be so important, or that exit in the first corner in the lead, and I think if you're able to do that, then that's where the control is done. So again, that's going to push it down to Mercedes, although I think as we've been seeing that the Ferrari is very good when it comes down to race pace. But Barcelona, you can still overtake. Russia, we've seen you can overtake. All the circuits we've been to, generally you can overtake. Monaco is just one of those that's that little bit more difficult, but then you've got people like Max Verstappen who has said, it's more exciting now. Now you've got to take that extra little bit of a risk. Will Sebastian Vettel take that extra little risk just for the sake of getting a race win? I'm not sure, because this is not necessarily about a race win and the Monaco Grand Prix. It's about the championship. So that risk factor is not, to me, going to happen with those guys at the front who are at the head of the championship because they can't take that risk of not finishing. So that's where the max factor probably won't come into effect at the front end. But the max factor will still be the max factor with Max. And Max will be pushing it there in a Red Bull that may be a bit more competitive overall, but again, still lacking, I think, the whole package that they need to really challenge those guys at the front. But I think they would then be probably on the third row.
Brilliant, Johnny. Thank you, as ever. We're off to pop on our Speedos, charter a yacht, and head to the Med. But you can check out all the latest odds on betsafe.com for practice, qualifying and race day.
Sun cream. More sun cream.
We've got sun cream.
Okay.
And champagne.
Okay, of course.